What truly breaks them isn't your anger, it's your silence. It's the moment they look back, and you're no longer reachable. Not because you block them, but because you've become someone they can't access anymore. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That's the kind of transformation they never see coming. They expected you to fall apart, to chase, to beg for clarity. But instead, you vanished into your own evolution. You didn't post a comeback, you became one. And that's what lingers in their mind. Not your pain, but your power. Not your reaction, but your refusal to be broken. This isn't about proving your worth to the one who left. It's about becoming someone so focused, so deeply aligned that their opinion no longer holds weight. You don't want them back, you want yourself back. Stronger, calmer, untouchable. In this video, I'll share 7 brutal, beautiful Stoic strategies to help you turn heartbreak into transformation. Not someday. Now you'll learn how to reclaim control, weaponize your silence, and build a life so elevated that regret isn't something you chase. It follows them. If you're ready to stop bleeding for people who never valued your depth, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin your return.
Number 1.
Focus on what you can control. When someone you trusted deletes you from their story, the pain that follows is fed less by absence than by imagination. Your mind spins. Why did they turn away? Who are they seeing now? Marcus Aurelius called that frantic tilt the agitation of puppets, movements yanked by strings you do not hold. His remedy was brutal simplicity. Narrow your field of concern to judgments and actions inside your fence, and the storm beyond it loses leverage. Everything else must drift away like ash through open fingers. Yet clarity must flow into conduct or it curdles into wishful thinking. Therefore, the first practical step is to shield your mornings from speculation. The moment you wake, resist scrolling, resist spying, resist asking questions the universe will not answer. Instead, sit upright and perform the premeditation malorum that Epictetus prescribed. Speak the likely disturbances aloud in a steady voice. Messages may stay unread, a rumor may surface, an image of them might cross my feed. None of that can command my will. By naming threats, you convert them from invading armies into harmless silhouettes. When the actual event arrives, it meets a mind already familiar with its shape. Consider Steve Jobs after his 1985 exile from Apple. Forced out of the company he birthed, he could have launched a public crusade to reclaim reputation. He did not. He pivoted his obsessive energy toward building Next and nurturing Pixar. Jobs could not control the board's vote, but he could control the next question he asked himself. What challenge still sets me on fire? That single inquiry, repeated daily, forged technology so indispensable that Apple eventually called him home. His focus did more than heal his ego. It altered the trajectory of modern design. You are not Steve Jobs, and your test ground is an ordinary Tuesday. The gauge is whether your first waking thought is a stalking memory of them or a breath that launches you into purposeful action. In those moments, apply what Seneca called the reserve clause and silently add, if fate wills, your ex walked away. If fate wills, a project stalls. If fate wills, this is not surrender. It is an agreement to meet events with steady eyes and flexible tactics. Energy formerly spent on protest is poured into the next deliberate act, and momentum returns. Over days, these choices compound. You swap 5 minutes of scrolling for 5 minutes of stretching. Brew coffee with full presence instead of replaying arguments. Record 3 virtues practiced instead of 3 ways they failed you. Like a blacksmith striking iron, each swing removes dependency until presence becomes your default. People will notice the calm first, then the quiet radiance. Emotional control is not numbness. It is vital energy directed by choice. You become architect of your own economy, deciding what enters, what lingers, and what must leave. Yet the past will whisper. A private cinema of shared scenes may project itself against your ceiling at 3 a.m. When it does, bring attention to your breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6, and label the memory, not mine to alter. This somatic anchor restores the Stoic hierarchy. Body under mind, mind under reason. You cannot rewind a moment already lived, but you can reclaim the present heartbeat. Finally, view discipline not as a cage, but as sovereignty. By shrinking your focus, you close counterfeit doors so real ones can appear. Control breeds clarity, and clarity is magnetic. When someone asks why gossip or late-night messages no longer shake you, answer with Marcus's calm, I occupy only the space that is mine. In that line lives the serene authority that turns another's departure into your own ascension.
Number 2.
Build your silence into a sanctuary. When they leave, they don't just take themselves. They take the noise, the daily texts, the constant checking in, the shared rituals, the sound of another heartbeat in your daily rhythm. And suddenly you're left in a kind of silence that doesn't just echo, it confronts. But here's the paradox. What feels like unbearable absence is actually the first step toward liberation. The Stoics knew this deeply. They didn't run from silence. They leaned into it, because silence is where the soul reveals its shape. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He wasn't just warning us about the opinions of others. He was inviting us to detach from all unnecessary noise, both external and internal. That includes the urge to explain yourself, to fix things quickly, to seek comfort through distraction. Most people, after being left, run into new conversations, new lovers, new plans, anything to avoid the weight of their own thoughts. But healing doesn't live in noise. It grows in stillness. It matures in solitude. And it requires courage to sit still when every part of you wants to move. Just look at J.K. Rowling. After her divorce, she didn't escape into crowds or status. She sat with the silence. Jobless, raising a child alone in a small Edinburgh flat. She let the quiet hold her instead of running from it. And it was in that silence, not comfort, that the first pages of Harry Potter were born. There was no applause, no validation, just one woman, a pen, and the decision to listen to herself. The world that rose from that silence reshaped modern imagination, not despite the quiet, but because of it. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That retreat isn't built on accident, it's built by practice. But most avoid that work because silence holds a mirror. It reflects not who you pretend to be, but who you actually are. And unless you're brave enough to meet that reflection, you'll forever chase noise to avoid truth. But when you sit with yourself, without agenda, without performance, what begins to emerge is not weakness, but clarity. Start with the mornings. Instead of scrolling, sit in silence for 5 minutes. No music, no words, just breath and space. Let your thoughts pass like clouds across a vast sky. This isn't for optics, it's for realignment. With time, your nervous system begins to trust the quiet. You make sharper decisions, you say less, but every word has weight and people begin to notice. They can't quite explain it, but your energy feels untouchable. That's what silence builds. Not detachment, but gravity. It also reshapes how you express yourself. You no longer overshare. You stop rehearsing your worth. You don't post status updates to prove you're fine. You just are. Dignity begins with what you don't say, and your restraint becomes louder than any performance could have. Eventually, the silence that once felt like exile becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the most sacred space you know. Not because it's empty, but because it's yours. The person who left thought they left you broken, but what they actually did was clear the room so you could meet yourself again. And in that meeting, you begin to rise, not in reaction, not in revenge, but in quiet, anchored wholeness. They can't find their way back to you now. Not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown the noise they brought with them. You don't wait for closure. You've already closed the door and opened a better one.
Number 3.
Use pain as your sculptor, not your prison. Pain has two faces. One traps you, the other transforms you. The Stoics understood this duality intimately. They didn't run from pain. They studied it. They respected it. Because pain, when viewed rightly, is not just something to endure. It's something to use. And this is where your power begins. Not by avoiding the wound, but by asking, what is this pain here to teach me? Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Your heartbreak is not a curse. It's a chisel. It hurts because something is being carved, not away from you, but out of you. The unnecessary, the fragile, the parts of you that once needed someone else to feel whole. The Stoic doesn't ask, why did they hurt me? He asks, what is this pain refining in me? That shift in focus moves you from victim to architect. Most people stay trapped in the story. They become curators of the past, replaying betrayal, memorizing moments, trying to make sense of chaos. But the Stoic path is different. It invites you not to explain the pain, but to engage with it, not with blame, but with brutal honesty. What part of you was unguarded? What illusions were you holding on to? What standards did you abandon just to keep someone who was never meant to stay? These questions don't weaken you, they awaken you. Take Oprah Winfrey. Her life began in deep trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment. But she did something rare. She sat with the pain long enough to listen. And when she did, she found a voice. Not just a voice for media, but a voice for meaning. She transformed personal agony into collective healing. She didn't wear her pain as armor. She used it as foundation. That's what Stoic transformation looks like. You don't rise despite the pain, you rise with it. So how do you apply this? First, slow down, sit with what hurts, not to wallow, but to witness. Journal what the pain is saying, not just I'm sad or I miss them, but deeper. I feel disposable. I feel unseen. I feel like I wasn't enough. These truths, when spoken, stop festering, and when pain is no longer hidden, it loses its grip. It becomes something you can work with. It becomes raw material for resilience. Next, begin reframing. Instead of asking, how could they leave me? Ask, what parts of me were too dependent on being chosen? Instead of wondering if they miss you, ask, what do I need to reclaim in myself that I gave away too freely? These are Stoic reversals, flipping the narrative from external judgment to internal clarity. You're not shrinking, you're sharpening. And don't confuse this with bypassing. This isn't about pretending you're fine. It's about turning pain into fuel. Let it build new standards. Let it shape new boundaries. Let it teach you how to walk without leaning. Pain isn't meant to last forever, but it is meant to leave something behind. Wisdom, strength, discernment. Eventually something shifts. You stop bleeding. You start building. You start speaking from healed places, not hurting ones. And when people hear you, they sense the weight of experience, not bitterness, but depth, not perfection, but presence. You become someone who has walked through fire and didn't turn to ash. You walked out formed. That's what it means to use pain as your sculptor. You no longer wear your wound like a badge. You carry it like a tool, not to harm, but to shape. And with each silent transformation, you become less fragile, less reactive, more whole. You stop seeking closure. You become it.
Number 4.
Let your growth be your revenge. There is a kind of revenge that makes no noise. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't post proof. It doesn't even need a witness. It's the kind of revenge that speaks through your daily habits, your boundaries, your peace. It's not meant to be noticed, but it always is. Because when you rise in silence, when you evolve without bitterness, you leave a trail they can't follow, and that haunts them more than any confrontation ever could. The Stoics never endorsed revenge in the traditional sense. They understood something deeper. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He didn't mean to ignore injustice. He meant, don't become what hurt you. Don't let their betrayal pull you off your path. Don't trade your peace for petty validation. Instead, commit to your own evolution. Not loudly, not for show, but because your future is worth more than their opinion. That kind of growth becomes a fortress. When you stop reacting and start refining, something inside you solidifies. You no longer seek their approval, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You no longer replay what they did. You rewrite who you are, and that shift is everything. Michelle Obama embodied this mindset. When the world doubted her, when they questioned her education, her elegance, her place, she didn't fight back with venom. She rose with vision. Through discipline, purpose, and clarity, she transformed criticism into legacy. Her silence was never weakness. It was composure. Her actions were never for revenge. They were for impact. And in doing so, she became untouchable. Not in status, but in spirit. That is Stoic revenge. Elevation without destruction. Of course, in the beginning, your ego will resist. It wants recognition. It wants them to see you now, to regret, to miss you. That's natural, but it's not sustainable. The deeper you go into your own path, the less you care about their eyes. You begin to crave something higher. Alignment, not attention. Peace, not noise. And that's when the real transformation begins. So what does this look like in practice? You create rituals. Not for them, but for yourself. You rise early, not to post your grind, but to reclaim your mornings. You read. Not to impress, but to build mental strength. You train your body, not for image, but for stamina. You choose your food, your words, your friends, with care. Not because it's trendy, but because every small decision becomes a vote for who you're becoming. Growth then becomes your discipline, and your discipline becomes your identity. Eventually, this rhythm builds a life, one that isn't rushed, one that doesn't chase, one that cannot be shaken by someone's presence or absence. And when they try to return, and many do, you'll feel nothing but clarity, not cruelty, just the calm awareness that you've outgrown the room they still live in. You don't have to push them away. Your life already did that, simply by expanding, not through revenge, through refinement. True growth doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It becomes undeniable. Your energy shifts. Your choices change. Your peace becomes louder than your pain. And that's what people notice. Not your struggle, but your stillness. Not the noise you used to make, but the calm you now embody. In the end, this kind of revenge has nothing to do with getting even. It has everything to do with getting free. You stop orbiting their opinion. You stop rehearsing the past. You walk not away from them, but toward yourself. And with every silent step, you rise into a version of you that no longer fits inside their memory. That's the Stoic way. No chaos, no performance. Just quiet, disciplined, relentless growth. Not to punish them, but to protect who you are becoming. The best revenge isn't proving you're better, it's knowing you no longer need to.
Number 5.
Don't explain, transcend. There comes a moment in your healing when you realize that explaining is no longer strength. It's leakage. You're not rising if you're still rehearsing your worth. You're not free if you still need them to finally understand. The Stoics warned us. Where your energy flows, your power follows. If you're still trying to convince someone of your value, you've already forgotten that it was never your job to make them see what they chose to ignore. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That includes the moment you feel compelled to justify your silence, your growth, your distance. Because here's the truth. They already heard you. They already saw you. They just didn't care enough to respect it. And now they don't deserve an explanation. They deserve your absence. The Stoic doesn't beg for clarity, he becomes it. This isn't about being cold, it's about being clean. Clean from the need to seek external permission to live fully. Silence, when used with intention, isn't avoidance, it's ascension. You're not withholding words to punish, you're withholding them because they are now sacred. Because giving them to people who never earned them would be a betrayal of your own evolution. Look at Maya Angelou, a woman who lived through unspeakable trauma, racism, betrayal, and rejection, but never pleaded for understanding. She did not reduce her story to sound bites for shallow approval. She wrote, she created, she stood with unshakable poise, letting her life and her presence do the speaking. Her words were measured, her energy was disciplined, and the world listened. Not because she demanded attention, but because she embodied truth. That is transcendence, not noise, not explanations, but the still fire of dignity. At some point, your silence will upset people. They'll call you arrogant, cold, distant. You'll feel tempted to explain, to soften, to shrink just a little so they don't feel small beside your growth. But don't. The real higher ground is not found in endless accommodation. It is found in preserving your energy for those who truly honor it. You do not owe an audience to those who only ever applauded when you played small. Practically, this means learning the pause. Before you defend, before you clarify, before you send the long message, wait, ask, who is this really for? If it's for peace, you won't need to send it. If it's for ego, you'll feel it in your chest, and that's your cue. To delete, let them misinterpret, let them gossip, let them tell the story the way they need to, because one day your life will contradict every version they fabricated, and you won't have to say a word. This is the paradox of the Stoic path. The less you explain, the more clearly you are seen. The less you react, the more powerful your presence becomes. People will begin to feel the shift. They'll notice your posture, your boundaries, the way you carry yourself with stillness instead of struggle. And those who used to provoke you will feel something new. Not control, but distance. A sacred space they no longer have access to. Eventually, you'll stop needing closure. You'll stop needing to be understood. You'll realize that not every wound needs a witness. Some just need time, stillness, and the quiet decision to rise anyway. You become untouchable, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting altogether. That is what it means to transcend. To stop proving, to stop performing, and to start living. So when they say you've changed, you won't argue, you won't explain, you'll smile and keep walking. Number 6. Radiate self-respect in every gesture. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to shout, it doesn't perform, it doesn't prove, It simply is. And when you carry it, people feel it before you speak. That power is self-respect, not as a performance, but as a presence. The Stoics never obsessed over confidence. They focused on character, on the invisible thread that holds your choices, your habits, and your energy together, especially when no one is watching. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That's the trap. Craving respect from those who can't even respect themselves, while neglecting the only opinion that truly matters, your own. But something changes when you stop performing for attention and start aligning with your principles. When you begin living as if your standards are final, you stop shrinking to fit. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You start moving through the world like you belong. Not because they said so, but because you decided to. Real self-respect is quiet. It's not in loud affirmations. It's not in Instagram captions. It's in your boundaries, in the way you decline what doesn't serve you without flinching, in how you walk away from what drains you, not to punish, but to protect your energy. That calm certainty, that's the signal. You don't announce it, you live it. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman who was judged, mocked, misunderstood. Again and again, she was told to sit down, to smile more, to speak less, but she didn't fold. She showed up over and over, with composure, with dignity, with a clear sense of her role in the world. She didn't waste time trying to be accepted by those who couldn't comprehend her. Instead, she said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." That wasn't just philosophy, it was strategy. So how do you build this into your life? Start with posture, yes, physical, but also emotional. When you enter a room, are you standing in yourself or shrinking out of habit? Are you avoiding eye contact, waiting for cues to belong? Stop. You don't ask for a place. You take your place with steadiness, with breath, with deliberate stillness. Your body tells the world how to treat you before your mouth does. Then your speech. Speak with precision, not volume. Speak only when the words carry value. And stop explaining your standards. If someone can't see the value in your boundaries, don't lower them. Leave. Because every time you over-explain yourself, you leak energy. The Stoic doesn't persuade. He lives with such clarity that persuasion becomes unnecessary. Now look at your choices. Who you let close. How you spend your time. What you tolerate. What you no longer tolerate. Each decision either reinforces your dignity or dissolves it. Self-respect isn't just how you speak. It's how you curate your environment. And people will notice. They won't always like it, but they'll adjust to it, or they'll disappear. And both outcomes are gifts. Eventually something clicks. You stop trying to prove your value, you start acting from it, and your energy changes. Not louder, but deeper. Not more visible, but more solid. And suddenly, the rooms you used to fight to stay in begin to feel too small. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've expanded. This is the Stoic path. A life of poise, of precision, of silent strength. You don't demand respect. You radiate it. In how you stand, in what you allow, in what you walk away from without drama. And in the end, the world doesn't remember the loudest. It remembers the most self-possessed, the one who didn't shout for respect, but made it impossible to ignore. Number 7, create a life they can't access anymore. At first, you'll want them to see it, the changes, the growth, the silence that replaced your explanations. You'll imagine them scrolling through your life from a distance, quietly realizing what they lost. That desire is human, but it's not freedom, because true freedom is when their awareness no longer matters. When your progress becomes so personal, so grounded, so sacred that even their opinion feels like background noise. That is the final shift. You don't just move on, you evolve beyond access. The Stoics didn't separate from people out of pride, they separated from chaos to preserve clarity. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That includes attention, that includes approval, that includes replaying stories in your head where you're still trying to be seen by someone who already walked away. You gain nothing by remaining emotionally available to a door that's already been closed. Sovereignty begins when your peace no longer depends on their return. So what does this look like? It looks like building quietly, relentlessly, without updates, without revenge, without needing them to watch. You stop trying to be seen and start becoming someone who doesn't need to be. You turn down the volume of your life for others and turn it up for yourself. Every step forward is done in silence, but felt deeply in your posture, your presence, your discipline. Look at Viola Davis. She grew up in poverty, surrounded by violence, scarcity, and limitation. She wasn't handed validation, she wasn't offered recognition, but she didn't wait. She worked through rejection, typecasting, and silence. She built a career and a self that didn't need permission. And when the world finally applauded, it didn't define her, because she had already defined herself. Her evolution was real before it was visible. That is what it means to live out of reach, not in ego, but in elevation. You start small, you refine your routines, you filter what you allow into your space. Physically and mentally, you limit screen time, you eliminate drama, you become surgical with who gets your time, your energy, your inner world. You stop explaining your peace, you stop apologizing for your distance, and slowly the version of you that once clung to closure begins to dissolve. What replaces it isn't louder, it's quieter, stronger, wiser. You also stop narrating your progress. The Stoic doesn't say, "Look how far I've come." He just continues. And that steady motion becomes a boundary. The old games no longer interest you. The old cycles no longer seduce you. Even if they try to return, they'll find something unfamiliar. Not just your absence, but your indifference. You don't live there anymore. Eventually, your life becomes inaccessible. Not by design, but by growth. Not because you slammed the door, but because you moved homes entirely. You've built something so rooted, so intentional, that it doesn't allow space for what once drained you. And the people who used to pull you into conflict now feel lost in your stillness. Not because you're cruel, but because you've changed languages. You no longer speak in guilt. You speak in boundaries. You speak in actions. You speak in silence. This is the final stage of transformation, not spite, not coldness, just quiet evolution, a life built on purpose, a rhythm no longer disrupted by other people's noise. When they say you've changed, you won't need to respond. You'll simply keep walking. Because the truth is, they don't even know where to find you anymore. Not online, not emotionally, not spiritually, and that's exactly how it should be. This is the Stoic exit. No speech, no bitterness, no public goodbye. Just a life that moves forward, out of reach, not to hurt them, but to finally honor you. You don't have to prove anything to the people who left. You don't need their apology, their recognition, or their return. What you need, what you've always needed, is your peace, your clarity, your center. And now you have the tools to protect it, not by closing your heart, but by opening your eyes, not by performing strength, but by becoming it, day by day, quietly, deeply, unshakably. This wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance. Remembering who you were before they broke you. Remembering who you are now that you've rebuilt. You didn't just rise. You rose with purpose. And from this place, you don't chase love. You radiate it. You don't demand respect. You embody it. You don't wait to be chosen. You choose yourself. If this video spoke to you, like it, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to stop explaining and start becoming.